If you haven't already, be sure to create your free Doug membership today by clicking on the Doug Hub in the left menu bar to access year-round community content, local meetups, and more. Please welcome veteran superhero Arnaud de Calavon. Today he will be showcasing premiering content in his session, Saving My View on Saved Views. Please stick around after Andre's session for a live Q&A.
Hello everyone, thank you for attending this session on the DynamicsCon. In my session will be about saving my view on saved views, and I will do this presentation now, which is a pre-recording, but in the meantime I will be watching all questions coming in. At the end of this session there will be a live Q&A, and then I will also answer some of your questions which you have in the meantime, so feel free to type your questions already in the chat. We'll come back to that one after this presentation. Just quick about me. My name is Arnaud de Calavon. I'm currently working as solution architect at Greece. There's some additional contact information on this slide, and feel free to reach out to me or follow me wherever you are in the world. And let's start with the presentation itself, at least with starting with the objectives. We would like to give you a bit of understanding what are the benefits of personalization in the application and the use of saved views. Also understand some of the caveats on saved views when you do personalizations. Also, I will tell you how to distribute the saved views to all users in your organization, and also learn a bit of how you can distribute saved views encoding if you're an ISV or you have partner solutions. Well, let's start with if users will have an overview of finance and operations the first time, they will just shout out, "This is not my application." Why? Because Microsoft Dynamics 365 is overwhelming. It is designed to show all content on the forums, and it's not a personal issue. It's not intuitive. People have to do too many clicks in the system. They say, well, we don't need all the fields, we don't need all the features, and this is not efficient enough. We should have a better user interface to do my job. Microsoft did add some personalization options in the application, and during the recent years, they improved it also with a saved views functionality, which will improve also the options to save all different kind of personalizations and also distribute it within your organization. Well, how would do it? At least we always say less is more. We can limit the number of options available to users with 3 different options in the application. This is by implementing the correct security rule and grant it to the users to just have only the menu items visible to the end user, which are really required. Besides that, it is also an option to use configuration keys to enable or disable particular features in the application. And Microsoft also brought a personalization option to do fine-tuning on the forms, hide elements, move things around, rename certain labels, etc. Well, when talking about these 3 different options, for some of the options it is just a choice what to use here. For example, if you look at the sales order forms or the purchase order forms, there's really a lot of information. And one thing in common what a lot of companies will not require is catch weight functionality. The catch weight fields can be disabled by configuration keys. It can also be hidden using the security role implementation, but it can also be hidden using personalization. So what is the best choice here? That depends on your organization. Do you have some companies where catch weight is required and others not? In that case, the configuration key might not be the best way. When you are using the configuration keys, in that case, you have to enable a maintenance mode to be able to disable or enable the options. So I'm personally not a real fan of the configuration keys. My preferences would be implementing everything with security rules and personalization. Let's go to the next slide and just give a brief overview of what is possible to manage the form layouts after a user just got the correct security rules. What we can manage with the saved views would be hiding certain content, some fields, menu items, also sometimes called actions, the fact boxes on the forms, but you can also rename certain fields and menu items to adjust it to more your organization language. You can rearrange controls in the grids. You can do some grouping and set certain different width to have fields presented, and everything will be visible to your convenience. You can also use a functionality to set fields as required. And setting field as required has a caveat, but I will come back to that one later. You can also say certain fields which you think you should not touch. You can also lock them for editing, so you have them as in view only. You can skip a tab sequence. If certain fields are usually not to be entered, you can just skip them for tabbing through your page, which will bring you quicker to the controls you need to work when you want to use the keyboard. Also, a tab state, if you have fast tabs on details form, if it's opened or closed, can also be managed using the saved views. You can also promote certain fields to show in the header, and even you can add Power Apps and websites. That can be just linked to the form or embedded in the forms as well. Now, next to managing the form layout, there's also an option to manage what data you will see on the different forms. Already in the first versions of Microsoft Dynamics AX, Microsoft brought an advanced query form where you can save the queries, and the saving the queries is still supported. In AX 2012, a lot of organizations were used to use favorites and also then use the saved queries as a default for the favorites. That is not supported in the way it was in AX 2012, and there's a workaround to save all those favorites, including a particular query, on workspace tiles. And if you save a particular view of a form, that also contains at that moment the current query. So that means that if you save a view, you can also have a particular set of records, maybe customers from a certain region, and create views per region. That can be saved as well. And if you just add additional tables, join tables on the query itself, it can have an impact on your performance. I'll come back to the performance a bit later as well to talk about it. It's not always a performance issue. Sometimes it's even just less information will be better. But when you set particular ranges on the records to be visible on the form, then if there's no index in the SQL database available, it can slow down the loading of the records. I'll go into a demo, go into finance operations, bit of highlight the personalization options from the historical point of view in finance operations, and then also move over to the more modern saved views to manage all your preferences. Now we are in finance and operations, and you see there are a lot of different tiles while I'm a system administrator. When a user will log in, he will just see a particular dashboards and not all of these workspaces. If we first go to the all customers form, what we were used to have in the past is that we could go to a particular field and could say, I want to hide this column. And also if the extension is not used, it would be possible to hide this column. And you could also move things around a bit. But while doing those personalizations, it was also an option to go to the form information for the customer table, and then export and import your personalization and move it over to other colleagues, which could probably import that personalization. Later, Microsoft also added a feature, a form where you could manage it and copy it over to other users. That form has been enhanced also to support the saved views. I'll come back to that one later. And also what we had in the past was if we want to just change the data visible on the screen, it was possible to go to an advanced filter or sort option where we can manage which records will be visible. Maybe we are interested to show or just view only the customers for a particular field group. I'll first click reset as I don't know what is really now in the background. If you take the customer group and set a range on, for example, customer group 10 and 30, you see now that we have only the customers for these two groups. But using the advanced filter or sort, it was possible and still possible to save this particular query. Now a bit more towards the saved views functionality. When you do all kinds of changes on the form, then you can combine all personalization options for hiding fields, moving fields around, or maybe hide some of the menu actions in the bar. So also it would be possible, for example, for the projects, if you're not using it, just hide it. And we can do more personalizations, and in this case also still the customer group is filtered with 10 and 30. And what you see is while doing all kinds of changes on this form as a user, the standard view has now a star indicating that there's a change which can be saved. So if we click on the drop down, we can save this view as a particular view, and in this case it says my view. It could also be my customers 10 and 30. You can choose to pin this as your default view, yes or no. If we do this, then the next time we open the form, it will by default open the my customers 10 and 30. Now in Dynamics AX 2012 it was possible to have multiple favorites for the same form, which is not possible here. At least we can have one favorite, and when we open the form have a default view. If you want to have multiple views on this, then it would be possible to add a particular view also to a workspace as a tile or maybe as a list, and in that case you can create multiple views or just multiple queries and have direct links to it where you can, for example, filter on customer group or another one on a currency code euros, etc. Now some additional tips. It is possible to create multiple views for your own convenience as a user. I did prepare already some more options. You can also have an joined tables where if I now joined this table, the customers table with the customer transactions, and also on the transactions I did filter with a range of all transactions between today and 180 days back, which is now called being the active customers. So if we take a look at that view, then currently I have 3 customers. Also, it is possible to use the query and have a view with a non-exist join, meaning I want to see all customers without any transactions. And in that case, I named that one all new customers, meaning that these are the customers which don't have any transactions in the application. Now, when we just had to look at what we did so far, we are able to change particular views. We can set a particular view as a default. And also as a user, we can go to a more option and look at manage my views. This will open a particular form where you can also change the default, but also delete a particular view if you made a mistake. And next to this, you can also have a look at organization views. I will come back to that one later. Just talk about the personal views now. There's a standard view always, which is of a type Microsoft. It's not possible to change or to delete that one. Only the personal views can be deleted. Also from here, you can publish a personal view as an organization view. If you think this is a view which can be used by any user in the application, we can publish it and also provide for which rules in the application is this view applicable. I will not do it now. So this is a bit of the basic of the saved views where I can manage different type of views. One thing I didn't mention here yet is we are now currently on a list page overview of all customers. When we dive into the details, then we have a lot more elements on the form, which also can be personalized to hide certain fields, maybe rename particular fields or move certain things around. And the saved views you have here are a different saved views from the list page. So for the details and the list pages, you have different views which you can manage. If on the list page you did hide particular menu elements, then on the details you will still see them unless you also hide them and save it as a view for the details as well. So let's go quickly back to the PowerPoint presentation. Next to just this demo, the saved views got introduced by Microsoft already as a preview back in 2019, and it was made mandatory about 2 years or 1.5 years later, where now everyone will have the saved views. Besides just the basic functionality for the saved views, Microsoft also had enabled or just provided feature management for saved views for example, the wage processing, or saved views for released products, or saved views for production control. What are those features about? Microsoft provided a set of some basic saved views to smoothen the process of particular data entry or view of particular forms, already with some predefined views which can be, or at least could be, enabled, but now are made all mandatory, meaning that these are already published by default as organization views in the application. We'll come back to what is the difference between a published or not published view with a next demo. And also just recently Microsoft announced that for warehouse management, the saved views are already mandatory for a while, and not only the saved views, but a lot of features, they have been cleaned up now in the 10.032 application. So if you would go to a most recent version with currently a preview of 10.032, you might not see all of the options here when you filter on all features related to saved views, because Microsoft is cleaning up some of the feature management options to have just a better overview of this form as well. Now, what is interesting to look at and enable in the application later as well, if you have the saved view support for workspaces, that can be enabled. Today, if you just personalize your workspace a bit, then it will just be kept as is. When you enable saved view support for workspaces, you also must save your changes, but you can then also create multiple views out of it. And there's another option called saved views performance enhancement, and at least I would recommend to enable that one. When you today, if you have not enabled this one, and today would start a form with also a saved view where you have another query or view on your data, it will load first the standard query, and it will load the new query as your own preference, which is in fact 2 times just retrieving data from the database, which is not required. If you enable this one, it will just only load the data which you are actually want to see with your new default view. Let's go to a next demo, as we did create some personalizations initially as a user. We will talk about just managing all those personalizations on a specific page, and also how to publish the views and what would be then the outcome of that one. So I will switch back to my demo environment. There's one form in the system administration menu, which is called personalization. When we open this form, then initially we have a view on all the published views, and initially all the views with the source of Microsoft are provided by the saved views features which were visible in my previous screenshot in the PowerPoint. And you can look at what kind of view names are available. But these published views are by default available to any user in the application, meeting particular security rules. Also, the saved views provided by Microsoft has particular rules where they are applicable to. And you cannot see it initially on this page. If you want to know which security rules are related to a particular view, you might also have a requirement to just add your own rules as part of your implementation. For that purpose, you can click on the Republish, where you can see which rules are currently selected by Microsoft to be included for this view, and you can add your own personal rules as part of your implementation also to this view, and then republish this view. Next to republishing, you can also select for which legal entities this view is applicable. If you do so, note that this whole view is only restricted to certain legal entities. It's not per role, it's just for the whole published view at that moment when you make the change. It can also be the case that particular views are not required, but they are published and provided by Microsoft out of the box. And in that case, if you don't want to use it in your implementation, you can click on the Unpublish, which will remove it from the published views. But still, they are available to review, and maybe you can also then again publish them when there's a need and you want to use it. Now what we can do is also the personal views we created. We can have a look on them all, and for example, I also did create one for the users. When we want to have this view published to the whole organization, we can click on Publish, where we can provide a name. The My View will not be really convenient to use, but maybe active system users. We can then also tell which rules will be applicable, and also the system administrator role will be applicable to have the view available then. And we can also include the security administrator. Now, when we want to publish this, we can publish it also as a default view, meaning that if they had already a standard or maybe a personal view, if you publish this organization view, that will be the new default for the users. So we'll publish this one, and once this is published, it will also be visible in the published views. Let me check where it is now. It's the last one. It has the name active system users, and you can see it's not the source Microsoft, but it's an organization view. Now, if you want to move the personalizations from an UAT or development environment to another production environment, then Microsoft also provides the option to export and import those views. If you export a particular published view, it will also export all the role contents in it. So let me quickly click on it, and that will just create a particular file. For example, like the invent on hand information, which has an XML layout with a structure of what is the contents of that personalization. Then you can take that file, go to another environment and click on import view, and then you can select, do you want to import user views or organization views? And the difference is that an organization view will contain particular security rules, and the user views will not have a context of a security rule. One additional thing, if you publish a view to all users as part of a particular security rule, when there will be new users joining the application, they will also directly get the organization published views as part of their security rules. So there's no need, like we needed to do in the past, copying all personalizations from one user to another. That's already managed also with the saved views. I'll return back to my presentation. Just talk a bit more on some of the best practices you can do in your organization. Well, some best practices for the implementations at your own environment. You can start with creating corporate views, meaning that maybe on the sales orders or the purchase orders, or just identify all most frequently used forms. If there are any objects on that form which is not useful for your implementation, you can create a corporate view out of it, meaning that you can hide some content which is not required at all. You can rename particular controls where you can specify the language you are used to talk about clients or customers or clients or maybe debtors. You can rename it like your own language, and you can rearrange some controls, and then once you have done that, you can save it and publish. If you publish that to the system user role, then all users will have that corporate view available, which will be a better starting point to just look at the individual tasks to be performed by the users instead of having an overwhelming form. And for example, I always disliked the form for the released products, which is having over 200 different fields. And the released products, I will just also show a quick demo if we have some time left on that one. What you can achieve with that, with the saved views. But it would be better just to have a nimble form with the released products, and then start talking about, hey, are you a purchasing manager, or are you a sales manager, or are you a financial person? What fields are required for your particular role or task? So that means that once you have the corporate view, you can take that again as a base to optimize it per particular role. And once you've done that, even maybe a particular user would be able to perform a specific personalization to meet their own requirements and be more productive in the application. We'll quickly go back to the application. On the personalization forms, we just talked about what is a published view if we are talking about the corporate views or the views per role. We can publish them. Once a user wants to optimize it for their own tasks, that will be stored as personal views in the application. And we can also review them and copy, for example, to users. But there might also be some cases where you say this user is not allowed to do any of the personalizations, or maybe just restricted for particular forms. That can be done on the user settings page. In this case, the user, Andre, which is me. We can manage if the personalization is allowed, yes or no, and what is then the access level. Is it a full or restricted? And full means that you can do all personalizations as listed earlier in this presentation, and restricted means that the user can only just enlarge particular columns and not just rearrange the form. With specific page overrides, it would be an option to manage per view or just per page in the application if the personalization is allowed or not, or on what level. So next to optimizing per user and task, it is also an option to control what forms users can personalize or not. Now, from a development point of view, there's one form design property available where if you think it does not make sense for any user to make a personalization on maybe a particular dialog form, then as a developer you can decide to set the allow user setup to no, meaning that the user is not able to do any personalization on this form. Another tip for ISVs or partner solutions, I just showed a few minutes back what is the contents of an export of the personalization from a published view or maybe from a user point of view. That is an XML file. How Microsoft did manage the saved views as part of the feature management is initially there's in the application, in the development environment, a resources node, and all views are stored as individual resources. And then using the feature management, if you enable it, at that time, when enabling the feature, it will just extract all those XML files from the resources, and it will publish it to the company, or to the application itself. So in fact, what Microsoft is doing, they have a resource in the development environment. Using the feature management, it will be extracted and it will be set as published views. And there's an opportunity for ISVs and partners where they can just also store the personalizations or particular views in resources, and then maybe using some custom coding, ensure it will be also copied to the published views of an implementation. And how to do the custom coding, that's not part of this presentation. Just also, if we talk about the published views created by Microsoft again, then I need to go back to my presentation, to my demo environment. And one of the things they did provide is also some additional views on the product information. So for example, the released products, that is one of the forms with the most fields available to enter, and not all users are using them all. And from the list page, Microsoft provided one additional view, which is a product creation view. And what is happening here is that a lot of menu options at the top will be hidden. With this view, there will be focus on only those menu items which is required for setting details for products. When you create new products, you will not see any information like transactions. And when we go to the details of a particular item, then looking at the views, there are multiple views available. Also one called the product creation. That will also limit the form with a lot of hidden features, or fields hidden, where you can only now focus on what is really required for purchasing, sell, the manage inventory, engineer, and just view details and not all the information available. Now also what you can do as a user is for example, look at logistics information only. And Microsoft provided some views out of the box, but there's no detailed documentation what is really the effect of doing so. So what you would need to do in your organization as well is just have a look at them. Are they useful or not? If they're not useful, you can unpublish them. If they're a bit useful, you can take them as a base and then start personalizing and creating your views for your own preferences in your application. I'll return to the PowerPoint for some additional resources. If you search on the internet for an optimizing the experience in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, there was a tech talk hosted on December 14-15 by Kevin Honeymoon and also Jason Green. A really great presentation, also talking about optimizing the user experience, hitting the personalizations and the saved views. And there's some information on the internet about how to personalize it from a user experience and a bit of generic information about saved views. If it's a bit too hard to find it, ensure that you will use these links to get that same information. So thanks for watching this presentation. I will now go to the meeting chat and we can do some live Q&A. And thanks for attending this session. And I will hope that you will enjoy this event and will be able to attend more interesting and awesome sessions on this DynamicsCon event.